Hello, welcome to the November 2011 video edition of the Iowa General Fund Monthly Revenue Memo. I'm Jeff Robinson, Senior Fiscal Analyst for the Iowa Legislative Services Agency, the nonpartisan support agency of the Iowa Legislature. This video will cover the first 5 months of cash fiscal year 2012, and I will also provide a brief discussion of the differences between gross and net receipts and the difference between a cash year and a true fiscal year. I will also discuss reporting receipts with or without transfer revenue. Iowa General Fund revenue, unadjusted, declined a minor 0.8% in November when compared to November of 2010. With proper adjustment for differences between the years, the actual growth rate for the month was more like positive 2 to 2.5%. The change to the deposit destination for the first $106 million of cigarette and tobacco tax continues to be the major adjustment for month-to-month and year-over-year comparisons. Over the first 5 months of the cash year, net revenue has declined 0.8%. But as has been the story each month this fiscal year, the decline is entirely the result of cigarette tax allocation change enacted this past legislative session. The current Revenue Estimating Conference estimate for net general fund revenue growth, excluding transfer revenue, is positive 1.4%. If I recalculate that estimate without cigarette and tobacco tax revenue in the math, the estimated growth adjusts to 3.4%. If I was also to calculate the net general fund revenue growth rate without cigarette and tobacco tax, the actual year-to-date growth rate is 3.3%. So ignoring the cigarette and tobacco tax deposit change, actual growth year-to-date is slightly below projections. Let's now have a look at net receipts by month over the most recent 13 months. For the following charts, the underlying numbers have not been adjusted for any calendar or processing issues. Revenue increase months are colored blue, decrease months are red. With a November decrease, net revenue has now posted decreases in 3 of the past 5 months, although the decreases are due to the cigarette tax deposit change. Personal income tax revenue is the most significant source of general fund revenue, and personal income tax revenue growth has been positive for each of the months this cash fiscal year, and the overall growth rate for that period is a decent 3.9%. Although this increase percent is below the 4.8% experienced during the first 5 months of fiscal year 2011. Growth in the income tax withholding deposits has not been strong this fiscal year, up only 2.8% year-to-date. Sales and use tax revenue has shown a similar pattern to personal income tax with 11 growth months in the past year. Over the past 5 months, sales and use tax gross revenue increased 3.5%, the same growth rate experienced through November last year. Although slightly negative for the month, corporate tax revenue experienced a substantial turnaround starting with May 2011 and has increased almost 33% over the period. Corporate tax revenue has contributed substantially to the overall general fund dollar growth over these past 7 months. Tobacco and cigarette taxes are part of other taxes, and it is here that we see the impact of the tax allocation change, with significant declines shown July through November. The month of November is the 5th of 6 months that will show significant declines in other taxes due to this cigarette tax allocation change, and the decline months should finish with December. When watching these monthly videos and reading Legislative Service Agency revenue reports, you may come across references to gross revenue, net revenue, cash year, fiscal year, and net revenue excluding transfers. I will now provide a brief explanation of these terms. Gross revenue is simply the money deposited into the general fund in a given period without adjustment, while net revenue represents that same gross revenue number negatively adjusted for tax refunds paid out of the general fund over that same period. As shown in this table, Iowa refunds around 17 to 18% of gross revenue through the combination of regular tax refunds and school infrastructure refunds. The state budget and expenditure limits are based on net revenue, not gross revenue. On the topic of cash year versus fiscal year, the Revenue Estimating Conference projects revenue on a fiscal year basis. The general fund budget and its expenditures also follow a fiscal year. For convenience of explanation, however, most reports during the course of a year are presented on a cash year basis, July 1 through June 30. While both a cash year and a fiscal year begin July 1, a cash year basis attributes all revenue received and refunds issued July 1 through June 30 as part of that single fiscal year, While a fiscal year basis accounts for only the revenue and refunds that are properly related to that fiscal year, and a fiscal year includes a hold open period after June 30 where additional revenue is deposited to the previous fiscal year and additional refunds are charged to that previous fiscal year. The hold open period ends August 31st for refunds and September 30 for receipts. While a cash year basis provides a constant format for revenue change explanations, in the end it is the net revenue on a fiscal year basis that matters. So for fiscal year basis, it takes 15 months to properly account for all of the transactions of a single fiscal year, with the refunds in July and August charged or accrued to the previous fiscal year, and the receipts received in July, August, and September divided between the current fiscal year and the fiscal year just completed. To accomplish this revenue division, the Department of Revenue first deposits all revenue during July, August, and September to the new fiscal year. At the end of September, the Department goes through all deposits over the July 1 through September 30 timeframe and attributes each deposit to the fiscal year where the economic activity that generated the revenue took place. Adjusting entries attributing the transactions to the proper fiscal year are then entered into the accounting system. It is this 3-month hold open period that makes monthly reporting on a strict fiscal year basis problematic. Finally, most revenue reporting from this agency refers to net revenue excluding transfers. Revenue is reported excluding transfers because transfer revenue varies considerably from month to month and year to year. If the monthly and year-to-date dollar and percent growth numbers were presented with transfers included, there would be many more caveats as to the actual dollar and percent growth rates in these monthly reports. In addition, actual transfer revenue is almost always very close to the amount budgeted, and transfer revenue has very little to do with the function of the economy. Providing the numbers without the effect of transfer revenue makes the reports easier to understand. However, the budget and expenditures of the state are based on net revenue, including transfers. So transfer revenue, while usually ignored in monthly reports, is nonetheless fully accounted for in the budget process. This chart provides the history of general fund transfer revenue deposits on a 12-month moving total basis. The chart shows that there are significant variations in transfer revenue from time to time. In summary, the month of November was a mildly positive month after adjustment, and while net revenue deposits for the first 5 months of the cash fiscal year are slightly negative, this is entirely the result of revenue allocation changes. Adjusting for the cigarette tax allocation change, net general fund revenue is positive, but slightly below the current revenue estimating conference projection. The growth this cash year has been led by corporate tax receipts. Individual income tax withholding receipts are the #1 source of general fund revenue, and the growth in that revenue source, while still positive, has been slowing. Thanks very much for your interest in Iowa General Fund revenue. Goodbye, and we will have another monthly video memo ready for you in early January.